So, you got any new plans for how you're going to ruin my campaign today?
Oh, I've got an idea or five.
Yeah, an idea or five, huh? Well, two can play at that game.
What do you mean we're live? Welcome everyone. This is your newly shaved corrupt overlord from Assorted Meeples here with...
Hey, I'm Braden.
And today we have a topic that is particularly close to both of our hearts, which are the utility spells in 5e. And especially some of the early level ones that can do some serious work and maybe don't get quite the love they deserve. And I know we each kind of went about this with slightly different definitions. So go ahead and just kind of explain what you were thinking of when you made your list, and I will do the same.
So, when I was picking this list, we're each going to be looking at 5 of our top utility spells for 5th edition D&D. And with mine, I was looking mostly at spells whose primary benefits didn't involve dealing damage or healing. I'm looking for things that can operate beyond those capacities, and if they can be used in more than one capacity, so much the better. Flexibility is key for a good utility spell.
And I kind of the same thing here. For me, a utility spell is one that doesn't do damage, doesn't heal, and I'm trying to focus more on kind of the underrated or underused ones, which also means it's going to disqualify some pretty incredible spells like, heat metal, good berry, in my case, water breathing. Those are just ones that I feel like a lot of people know. We both decided that we're only going to discuss spells that are level 3 and below. So these are ones that are useful either right from the get-go or in the early level spells that still have some punch as you hit those mid-levels. And would you like to start the shenanigans, or shall I have that honor?
No, I'll go ahead and start it off since you went ahead and called out one of my picks early on. So number 5 on my list is water breathing, which can be found on page 287 of the Player's Handbook. And water breathing is actually one of those spells that is fairly linear for a utility spell, in that it grants up to 10 willing creatures you can see within the range of 30 feet the ability to breathe underwater until the spell ends. Affected creatures also retain their normal mode of respiration. However, there are 2 components to this that make it a top-notch utility spell. It's a ritual spell in addition to being a regular spell, so if you have the ability to ritual cast spells, you don't have to burn a spell slot to use it. And most importantly, it lasts 24 hours. One day.
Yeah, the number of times I thought, oh, I finally get to drop them into the dreaded enemy of every D&D party, water. And he could still just breathe under it. Good talk. Or the number of rooms where the trap was hit, the room was flooded, but no one had to make a breathing save because everyone could breathe underwater. You did pull that one a lot, so that is not surprise me that is on the list. It is, frankly, it's insanely effective. I don't know why people would take water walking over water breathing. It's just such a good one to have for the party.
And water walking has the benefit of being able to walk across different types of liquids besides water that might be hazardous to breathe. But my favorite race in D&D is the Tabaxi. So it's kind of easy to build in a water's gross, I don't want to be wet. But if I have to be and get put in a situation of my worst fears, I absolutely refuse to be drowned by it.
That is fair. Alrighty, number 5 I discovered while learning how amazing the Bard is in 5e, and that is Bane. First level enchantment. Up to 3 creatures of your choice that you can see within range must make a charisma saving throws. Key point, not many early level enemies you face are going to have high charisma, which is a bonus. Whenever a target that fails the saving throw makes an attack roll or a saving throw before the spell ends, The target must roll a d4 and subtract the number from the attack or the saving throw. At higher levels, you just keep targeting more additional creatures.
And that's on page 216 of the player's handbook, correct?
Yep, 216. And so, if you're playing a low-level bard, it's all about battlefield control. And the fact that early on, 3 goblins, you get separated, 3 goblins jump out. Well, if the DM isn't rolling well, because goblins are not charismatic, they're... At least 2 of them are not making that save unless you're having a really bad day, in which case maybe you were just meant to die. We've had those characters. But they're trying to attack you, and it's like, okay, a 15 or 16 might be a good roll to do it until they roll the d4 and take away 4 or 3. And you'll find yourself slipping under that number so many times because of that extra die roll. Nathan's campaign was a famous example, or a friend of ours ran, where he thought he hit me when he had me separated 4 or 5 times, and every time the d4 took off just enough for me to dodge the attack. So for 4 rounds, my party members were slowly walking forward, muttering some version of "what the hell" as the bard kept insulting and baning each of the enemies. And while it does lose some of its power at higher levels, the thing is, even as you get slightly stronger enemies, suppose you have a fighter at level 10, he should have a shield and plate armor at that point, which means the DM still needs a really high roll to hit him. That d4 might still be enough to take down the enemy's hit enough to miss. So it's one of those utility spells that it just kind of slips under the radar, but in a party it's so effective to screw up the DM's plans.
Yeah, and I've not personally used Bane a lot, but I've been in parties with people who have, and it looks underwhelming on paper. I promise you, it carries its weight and then some in combat. Just a d4 doesn't sound like much, but there's so many times where you're just within a point or within 2 points of being hit or missed. And if you get lucky and the enemy rolls a 4 and just completely botches it, it's endlessly entertaining to watch your DM's expression just get more and more frustrated as you just dance through what should have been a challenging fight.
Especially as you make your magic casters that much stronger early level.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, the goblin just made the save. Roll your d4. The goblin didn't make the save. And it could happen so many times in a fight.
So good.
And the fact that it's concentration, all you have to do is stand back and not get hit, and your party just gets to clean up the rest. Well, I believe number 4 on my list is actually on yours, so you should go next.
Yeah. Your number 4 is higher on my list. So, for number 4, you were talking about what happens when party members get separated.
Bad things, usually.
Yeah, that let's split up gag is basically a death sentence for most parties for a good reason. Because you've basically split your power, you've nullified most forms of communication unless you had some insight early on to pick up some sending stones, realizing that your party was going to wander off and do what they wanted, or be a bunch of murder hobos, or whatever the case may be. But if you have the ability to communicate with them, even if it's with a couple sentences and they say a couple sentences back, that can drastically change the issues that one group or another may face while they're split up. So my number 4 pick is sending. Sending, which is on page 274 of the player's handbook, is a pretty nice little spell. Basically, you get to pick another creature, and you get to send them a message of up to 25 words. And then that creature has the opportunity to send a reply, also up to 25 words. The nice thing with sending is also that you're not necessarily limited to sending messages to creatures that are on the same plane as you. Now, if they're off plane, there is a 5% chance that your message just doesn't go through. Such are the risks of long-distance cell service. But, in all honesty, that's a pretty negligible thing, and you'll have a pretty good idea that the message didn't go through in most of those cases because you're just not going to get a reply, at which point you decide, maybe I'll just use this again, or it wasn't that important, I can just do this again tomorrow.
Plus, if you have a DM who loves to reward for role-playing, the amount of inspiration I've been granted for, oh god, help, oh no, oh god, help, because of that spell is just an added bonus.
Exactly. And the nice bit with this is, in addition to being able to send it pretty much anywhere, they recognize you as the sender if they know you, and any creature with an intelligence score of at least 1 can understand the meaning of your message. So, pretty much anything can have a sending sent to it.
Oh,
and
Timmy told Lassie he's in the well again.
and away you go. It's that simple. And sometimes spells that are just really straightforward are some of the best ones, depending on the situation that you're in. And having more communication, especially if you've got a DM who's basically watching your players for metagaming or for having access to information that they haven't picked up in game yet, and you just go, oh yeah, sending. Hey Greg, we found this dragon over in this cavern. Don't take a left when you get here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good call. The next one on my list is one I see get passed over all the time, and that's silence. And for silence, which it begins on page 275, but the main description's on 276, the main handbook. Second level, you can have this for up to 10 minutes, and it's a 120-foot range, which is nice. For the duration, no sound can be created within or pass through a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point you choose within range. Any creature or object entirely inside the sphere is immune to thunder damage, and creatures are deafened while entirely inside it. Casting a spell that includes a verbal component is impossible there. And there were a couple reasons I like this. I mean, one, it's kind of versatility. If you're facing a bat who's suddenly throwing out thunderbolts, just go ahead and put up a spear and decide what to do as you chug your healing potion, because you don't need to talk to do that. And you finally make healing potions useful if you have to take a full action for them. The effect you can throw it from a distance. It's a spell that's available to classes like Ranger. So, I mean, boy, you don't want to deal with that spellcaster, throw some silence down, hit him with a bow, while he's trying to yell out to others what's going on. He can't. Most of the spells will have a verbal component. He won't be able to do anything, and you just take your long-distance shots. And if you want to get creative with it, another neat little thing is, okay, you really, really want to make that stealth check. You know the DM lets you get so close before you have to make the check. Great, throw up a silence spear. How do you not get advantage getting ready to go into stealth mode when you can do it in a spear where nobody can hear you?
Completely fair. And as someone who loves playing casters pretty much in any RPG system, not just D&D, but pretty much any of the ones that I've played, that's been where I've gravitated first. A spell like Silence is literally your worst nightmare. Like, it just ruins most things you can do. And if you are someone who has not thought up a backup plan or is 100% reliant on your spellcasting, Silence is just...
I'll dispel it. Not in silence you won't, because you can't speak.
you gotta walk out of it, and sometimes that's as bad or worse. Like, it's one of those you've gotta do.
Yeah, in a cramped cave, that may mean your sorcerer has to walk up to the front line where your barbarian and fighter are waiting. Mm-hmm. They will be more than happy to take care of it from there for you. And at the same time, you get to center the point and tell the DM. If there's room with a little bit, that NPC has to move a direction. As long as he's not metagaming, he may not move in the right direction to get fully out of it. And so it's just those little extra things, the little extra ways you can use it, to me, is why, hey, we're camping in a dangerous area. Cool, throw up silence while we all take a short rest, and nothing can hear you as your warlock recovers.
And for whatever reason, this is a ritual spell.
Yes, it is. So
Why?
Yeah. And like the fact that it's available to classes like Ranger, where the first time I played Ranger, I don't think I even looked at my spell book until levels 5 or 6. So the fact that you have these slots you're not using, but you can suddenly throw out a silence or throw out something like that, it's such a good, underrated utility spell. Especially when you dig into the details of it.
No argument here. It's one of my least favorite spells to deal with. Well, speaking of spells that GMs just don't like dealing with.
It's that time, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if there's one thing that certain battles just fail to account for, and it's amazing how many times you can catch someone with their britches down, it's adding a Z-axis to the fight. So, my number 3 pick is obviously Fly. Fly is a 3rd level spell, requires concentration, but you can keep it up for up to 10 minutes. You touch a willing creature, the target gains a flying speed of 60 feet for the duration. When it ends, the target falls if it's still aloft, unless it can stop the fall. And if you cast it using a higher level slot, you can target an additional creature for beyond the first, depending on how many spell levels up you go from there. Fly will make you a target in cases where you're dealing with enemies that have ranged weapons, or if you're dealing with enemies that have capable spellcasters. It's going to separate you from the party. It's going to basically make you stand out unless you're pairing it in conjunction with something else to compensate for that fact. Also, if you like Fly, you really should keep a Featherfall ring on your person as well, just to make sure
just in case
your GM doesn't just go, okay, cute, dispel magic, and send you plummeting back to the ground.
Or he's bitter, and there wasn't originally going to be 2 crossbowmen in the fight, but you know what?
Suddenly. But if you can overcome those drawbacks, a Z-axis will get you out of the reach of all melee, and it will allow you to basically oversee the battlefield and shape it to your control. You can basically go, okay, I need to throw a fireball over here. If I were having to go from behind my teammates, I'd have to find a way to work around that.
Yep.
Not so here.
You can just pick the point and hit them perfectly without hitting your own.
Exactly. It just kind of makes the need for spell sniper or sharpshooter. You just don't need those most of the time when you can fly.
Yeah, which can then be used on other shenanigans. Or shenanigan improving traits.
Or you can just throw lightning bolts down from the sky. And, yeah, this is a narrow area, and this 10-foot wide hallway that's 50 feet tall or whatever, I'll just chuck a lightning bolt from the ceiling so that I can bypass the fighter who's trying to help out here. And just ruin the boss's career.
Well, number 2 is your favorite one when dealing with me.
Oh, we've reached that point, huh?
We have. We were at 2. It's a ranger spell, which means a good chunk of you who love the ranger already know what I'm about to say, but pass without a trace. Your party should not have a ranger without this spell. 1 action, lasts for up to an hour. A veil of page 264. A veil of shadows and silence radiates from you, masking you and your companions from direction. For the duration, each creature you choose within 30 feet of you, including you, has plus 10 bonus to dexterity stealth checks and can't be tracked except by magical means. A creature that receives this bonus leaves behind no tracks or other traces of its passage.
Oh, I hate this spell so much.
There's so much for a level 2 spell. The fact that there is no limit to the number of creatures or individuals a ranger can put this on within 30 feet of him. You can push in the NPCs, and at plus 10, that clanky plate mail cleric even has a halfway chance at passing a decent stealth check. If you have rogues and rangers, yeah, I believe like we were level 14 in your campaign when you had us roll. Like, okay, pass without a trace. We did the math. He had a 41 stealth. I had a 40. And that, I mean,
when you can sneak through a forest of elves in their home turf without trying, you throw up your hands because there's nothing you can do.
I believe your famous line was, "You're not even sure. You're not even sure if you're there." And yeah,
Accurate.
for stealthy characters, it's amazing. If you have that one specialty character, you need to get past the guards. You need to sneak a magic caster in, past some dangerous territory. Suddenly a +10 to stealth check. And there's a lot of little things here that also work. The fact that it lasts so long, you can get in and out of a place, and you have so much time to get away. And since you don't leave any tracks behind, they have no idea where to even start. You are basically home free, unless the DM has a really creative trap set ahead of time, like a specialty object you stole has a marker, because only magical means can track you, which also means early game, you're probably not running into too many characters who can even do that.
Yeah, at higher levels, this is less of a big deal because there is a very real risk that the big bad is going to have access to divinations or things like scrying to figure out where you are. But if you're, running around with level 5, level 6 characters, it's generally not reasonable for most cases to employ something like that. Like, maybe you'll have a wizard who's smart enough to have clairvoyance, but that's about it.
And even early on, especially if you have a DM who's good at not preventing metagaming, if the bad guy has the ability but no reason to even think you're there, you're still in charge. You're still good. To me, one of the interesting points that doesn't get used enough is the fact you can't be tracked other than magical means. Great. A person rolling a natural 20 then, even an automatic success table, shouldn't see you unless they have a little bit of magic going or that number puts them over. And it won't if you roll that high. And the other part is that you have enemies like spiders who they track you by spider sense, tremor sense. Well, they can't track you unless it's magic. So walk through that spider den. Have fun. Don't deal with them like I had to. And so Pass Without Trace, it's so much power for a second level spell. And once again, since it's one you find with the ranger, the second level spells aren't really at a premium with that class. So it's so much value from something that character might not use anyway. And the whole party benefits.
Agreed. So for my number 2, let me set the stage for you. And I believe this is Shane's number 4.
Yup, it's that time.
So, we're uncovering the secrets of this innocuous farming hamlet that actually has a pretty big issue with cultists and demons and the whole kit and caboodle basically running the show. We spend 3 sessions here basically leading up to a tremendous boss fight. Ton of enemies. Giant battle mats out. We're basically plotting our strategy and wondering what we're going to do as this horde charges us. And then our nature cleric, bless his heart, rolls for initiative, gets a high initiative roll, waltzes out, and says my 4 favorite words. I cast plant growth.
Yeah, that changed the battle pretty quick.
I have very rarely met a utility spell that can single-handedly trivialize a boss fight in the way that plant growth does. It's on page 266 of the player's handbook, and the spell channels vitality into plants within a specific area. There are 2 possible uses for the spell, granting either immediate or long-term benefits. If you go the immediate route, which just takes an action to cast, you choose a point within range, and all normal plants in a 100-foot radius centered on that point become thick and overgrown. A creature moving through the area must spend 4 feet of movement for every 1 foot it moves.
Yeah.
You can also exclude 1 or more areas of any size within the spell's area from being affected. And then there's the second use, which requires an 8-hour cast time, enriches the land, and all plants in a half-mile radius centered on a point within range become enriched for a year. The plants yield twice the normal amount of food when harvested, which is great when you're doing a long time walk effect.
Yeah.
But the first effect is why you take this spell.
Yeah, and that was devastating. 'Cause especially if you have heavily armored baddies like I did, who are melee heavy, 30 feet became 7. And to have 100, just to have that much, 100-foot radius covered, they're never sprinting through that. It doesn't matter how many times they double sprint. You can peg them, even not being an archery expert, till they're dead. And on top of that, I mean, your spellcasters can do the same. You can choose where to move, or if you want to be really creative, or, oh, what's that word I'm looking for? Arrogant with how you do it. Thank you, Eric. You just create an open kill zone where you just funnel them where you want them for the fireballs. Because it's the only open ground they can move in.
Other fun things you can do involve using Eldritch Blasts with Repelling Blast to basically kick them back 10 feet every time you hit them. So they basically aren't advancing on you.
If you have a Warlock, you will be bringing out the tentacles at that point. Because they're not going to be able to deal with it. And above all, the most interesting thing to me was just the fact, since it's not a magic effect, you can't dispel it. They're plants. So even if you have a strong caster, he can't dispel and clear the field. Even if you try to fireball that, a 100-foot radius with 30-foot fireballs is going to take a while, and you're going to roast your own guys on top of it. It's just one of those where in the right situation, or even the other side, wow, we picked a fight we can't win. That's how you cover your retreat. There's just, once it's down, if you didn't plan for it, fight's over, man. The players get to choose how they want to finish it.
Exactly. And it can also just be a good setup for animation of plants, spike growth. Just you can shape the battlefield into just the world's worst 100-foot radius circle. And unless they've got fire to clear it out, that's the ball game.
Yep. Their mate should have prepared fly.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we were down to my number one choice that we got left as well.
Yep.
Cool. I am more than happy to go with that. I especially like number one choices where it gets a bad rap for one reason, but you do the deep dive and realize, wait, this is a quality spell. And with that in mind, my third level utility spell is Sleet Storm, found on page 276. Classically known as, well, I was going to take it, but it doesn't do any damage. You should take it anyway, and here's why. Until the concentration, 1 minute, 150-foot range. Until the spell ends, freezing rain and sleet fall in a 20-foot tall cylinder with a 40-foot radius centered on a point you choose within range. The area is heavily obscured, and exposed flames in the area are doused. The ground in the area is covered with slick ice, making it difficult terrain. When a creature enters the spell's area for the first time on the turn or starts its turn there, you must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, it goes prone. If a creature is concentrating in the spell's area, the creature must make a successful Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC, or they lose concentration. In a lot of ways, to me, this is kind of a more bigger version of a general version of plant growth, where it does so many things at once, but you don't even need plants in the area. Because if you're in a barren desert or a stone vault with no plants, then plant growth doesn't work. There does have to be that starting element. Sleet Storm, wherever you are, boom. You have difficult terrain. You have difficult vision. Any DM who's paying attention is going to give them disadvantage trying to hit you out of that thing. You have their spellcasters who have to make a concentration save, which generally does not go well at lower to mid levels. And even if it does, they're still on treacherous ground if they want to move. And hey, are you flying? Did you get more than 20 feet up? Because if you didn't, you're about to have a really bad time. Because that still hits you too. And for creative uses of this, I mean, you have the slippery terrain. If you have any type of distance fighters, suppose you're in a cave and most of your guys have night vision. If there's torches in the room, the spell sprout says the light goes out. Oh, there's a bunch of humans in a cult. That's cute. Throw Sleet Storm. they can't see, you can. Have fun. And just the chaos you can create with this applies in so many places in a D&D campaign. So, well, yes, I get when you hear Sleet Storm, you want to see the damage. And I can see why so many people would just pass it over. But when you look at all the things it does in a small area, and it's like, oh, I have to make a Constitution saving throw for concentration. Then if I move, I have to make a Dex throw. And I still can't see clearly outside of it. And if I don't have night vision, I might be in trouble. Name a third level utility spell that has you thinking about 4 or 5 different problems at the same time. It is hard to come up with one.
Oh, don't worry. I've got one.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
We'll get to that in a moment. But first, I have a confession to make. Hi, I'm Braden, and I've overlooked Sleet Storm for the entirety of my 5th Ed D&D career. And I really shouldn't have. This does have some things going against it. Requiring concentration as your one concentration slot is a little obnoxious. The smaller area does make it easier to get out of in open areas, though good luck getting out of it if you're in an enclosed room. You're just going to have a bad time. But it just does so much. It's like silence, but turned up to 11. You're just ruining everything. Moving, casting, trying to set up any kind of light source. Just good luck. You're screwed if one of these comes down in the middle of your party.
Yeah, been getting flack for being a utility caster? Wait to that moment in your campaign where they need a distraction. Your moment has come. Because, boy howdy, do you have one here.
It's true.
And so, yeah, so I know it doesn't get a lot of love because it doesn't do the damage, but Sleet Storm, man, you look at everything it does, there's a lot of work there. You have a good party with you, and they're going to be really happy that you have that going for you.
It's going to be one of those spells that your GM has probably overlooked too.
Yeah, you will need to point out a few things to him in most likelihood, but as a GM, I appreciate when someone points out the details like that, so I don't have a problem with that. It's kind of interesting when they find a creative way to especially cause mischief, and that's a spell that in so many situations you could see it doing just that.
So you want a creative way to start mischief, eh?
Do you have one?
Oh, but I do. My number one pick is the Omni tool for making trouble for your GM. And a number of power gamers are probably going to recognize it straight off, but there's a reason that when I started making this list, I started my number one here and knew I was filling in
the rest
2 through 5. And for utility casting, your number one pick has to be glyphoforming. It's on page 245 of the Player's Handbook.
You can give us a summary because it's such a long description.
It is a long description. Basically, you have to spend 200 gold worth of materials, and it takes an hour to cast. So this isn't something you're going to be casting on the fly. It's a preparation spell. And there are 2 modes that you can use with it. You can either have it be something like explosive runes, or you can basically write in a trigger that kicks off the effect of a spell that you put into it. The explosive runes is pretty straightforward. Basically, when it's triggered, it explodes.
And you can, which I use to kill the monk in your campaign. Almost.
Yeah, he's not that bright.
And get you kicked out of the city. But since we're going utility spells, I assume we're focusing on the other one.
Yeah, I mean, 5d8 of whatever energy type is nice, but the spell glyph is the real prize here. Being able to store a prepared spell, ordinarily of 3rd level or lower, but if you cast it at a higher level, you can store higher level spells within it. You basically put the spell in a book or a box or something that's going to close or on a surface, and then when you trigger it, the stored spell is cast. If the spell has a target, it targets the creature that triggered the glyph. If it affects an area, the area is centered on the creature triggering it. So, great for traps if you want to keep someone out and you just basically put a fireball glyph on a door. Sure, you're going to have...
That'll keep the rogue from stealing your wallet.
You'll have 20 feet of fire coming into your room, but maybe it's worth it to
Yep.
burn down that inn. But the real prize is being able to summon creatures with it. It'll basically, if something's triggered, you summon the creature, goes after whatever triggered the rune. Or you can use it on yourself or an ally who reads it, and it waives the concentration component for that spell. Basically, it goes for the maximum time of the spell as long as it were concentrated upon. And that's the part that makes this spell just busted. Completely and utterly. Being able to cast haste without fear of disruption, fantastic. Being able to cast fly without fear of disruption, even better. Being able to cast fly and invisibility together.
Yeah.
Like, when you get around the one concentration per caster rule, all bets are off. You can do pretty much whatever you want. You got a dragon that's going to be harassing you? Great, investiture of fire. Or investiture of whatever element that you want to put out to deal with it. Plus, whatever else you want to do to prep. As long as you have time and money to burn, you're basically unstoppable in any situation.
Yeah, and it's a level of preparation that is just kind of otherworldly than what's meant to be in those early levels, and that makes it impressive. I think another detail that kind of gets overlooked is the fact that, and I kind of overlook this just because I look at explosive runes as being the obvious use, but there are so many others. You get to say what the trigger is. Suppose there's a situation of you're trying to figure out, you know, someone in the city is corrupt. You have a trigger for something to happen when someone evil does it. Create 3 letters, send one to each noble. At some point, a spell goes off. You know which one is evil now. It's a weird way to kind of work around the DM and try to figure out the mystery or create settings to your advantage to find information you might not be able to get otherwise. And that can open up some pretty interesting routes, even when you were mainly intending to do something else.
It's just so flexible. You can really employ it in a lot of creative ways. You can do a lot of stuff. You can set it up to destroy what's red, basically, by putting a destructive spell on it. You can send letters to different people if someone of X alignment reads it, or if someone has a habit of reading out loud as they're reading, you could set the trigger to be, when this is read aloud,
yeah,
do this.
It just really kind of opens up the possibilities. I just had an image now of you creating a giant present with a glyph of warning with fireball, and it's meant to go off as soon as someone casts Sleet Storm in the room. There you go. There's your damage for Sleet Storm. In the most unexpected way possible.
It's just so good. There's so much you can do with it. The primary trade-off is at 5th level, which is the earliest you're going to have access to this spell, 200 gold is often a lot of money. Like, having to spend that much on a preparation spell like that is not nothing. But by the time you're reaching 15, 17, 20th level, 200 gold is trivial. And
it's one of those that's still useful at extremely high levels, even though it starts out at 3rd. Whereas a lot of these others, admittedly, at some point along the way, lose some of their usefulness.
I mean, it just gets gross once you start being able to store other things above 3rd level in it.
Yeah.
Like, it gives you extra spells for the next day, effectively. It allows you to basically kick off something with, well, I know I'm going to be going into combat and I don't want to have to worry about concentrating on things, so while I'm buffing the party, I'll also just set this up so that I can start off with a sunbeam in the fight and just start firing lasers while I do other things.
Yeah, and you've pretty much covered that solidly. It is just ridiculously useful pretty much almost no matter what the campaign. And so guys, well, there you have it. You have a combination of some kind of power utility spells, some sneaky good spells, and if you cannot figure out how to get into some trouble with your DM with these 2 lists, I don't know what to tell you guys. So, as always, there are always creative ways to use some spells in this book that a lot of us haven't thought of. Please subscribe below in the comments. We'd like to hear your best stories of a creative way a utility spell was used. Was it the classic mischievous bard? Did you find a way that the ranger could prank your wizard? Did you just take your wizard to the next level, even at level 2? We're curious to hear what you guys think, so give us those ideas on your favorite utility spell stories. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be coming out with quite a few more of these. And I'm going to take some notes about how to ruin Braden's campaign the next session.
You weren't already?
Learn from the masters. You can always up your game. So that's it for us for Sword People. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, join us on Patreon, and have a blast with those campaigns. Give your DM a headache.
Give them all the
all
headaches.
the headaches.
Don't settle for one.
If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.